Andy Gibson. I am head gardener at Mindapples, because if you run your own organisation, you get to make up your own stupid job title. And can I just ask, before we start, just to help me out with a little survey that I do when I give talks like this, which is just by show of hands, if you're willing to share. Can you just put up your hands if you have mental health? Okay. So about half of you, maybe a bit more. Okay, right, good. Now put up your hands if you don't have mental health. Thank you, sir. Very good. Okay, hands up if you're confused. Good, even better. That's what we like to see. Now, I have asked this question in rooms all over the place, all over the country, and even in other parts of the world. And something very interesting happens when you ask, do you have mental health? Because about 10% of the audience usually puts up their hand. Some of them very proudly, some of them in a slightly tentative, confused sort of way. And then I say, so who doesn't have mental health? And then the same 10% of people put up their hands and look even more confused than they did before. And at that point, I have to step people through it, which is say, okay, hands up if you have a mind, and hands up if your mind has health. And then, okay, let's try it one more time, hands up if you have mental health, and we get everybody, and we're there, and thank you. Well done for being good at it, you passed the test. I will now talk to you. And that's really the nub of where Mindapples started. So we started from the perspective that actually our culture around mental health is broken. The term has come to mean illness. When we hear the words mental health, do you have mental health? People think, oh, you mean illness, right? Okay. And a friend of mine actually summed this up perfectly a couple of years ago. He said, you know, Andy, I'd love to help you out with Mindapples because I had mental health last year. And you go, what? That sounds great. He says, no, I had a breakdown. It was terrible. It's like, oh, okay, so you didn't have mental health. Okay, now I'm with you. And actually mental health has become this thing we're afraid of. It's become, oh no, I've got mental health. I've joined the 1 in 4. My life is over. Ah! And in fact, mental health should be amazing. It should be the best thing we can ever have. It should be, I've got mental health. Hooray! I love my quality of life. It's amazing. And so we started Mindapples to say to people, we all have mental health, we all have minds, and actually we can all do things to take care of them. And actually, this is one of the lesser known things about our minds, is that what we do makes quite a lot of difference to them. We really can actually take care of them, and we never talk about this. And there's a whole set of studies, from mostly from positive psychology, genetic studies on identical twins and all kinds of things, which basically is pointing towards the notion that around 40% on average of our mental well-being, our happiness, our mental state is down to our outlook and activities, the choices we make, the actions we take. About 50% is genetic, about 10% is actually your life circumstances, where you've come from in life, and about 40% is the choices you make from this point forward. Now, that's not to say that I could take somebody here and bisect them and say 50% of this is that's your parents, and 10% that's everything that they did to you when you were growing up, and then 40% the rest of that's your fault. It doesn't quite work like that. The way that it works is this is across the population, so on average, generally in the developed world. The point of this statistic really is we have a lot more control over how we feel than we like to think. And most of us don't really know what to do with that. We don't talk about it. We're not really taught anything about our minds. We're not taught about how to look after them. And so that's really where Mindapples comes in. So we ask people, what you do is good for your mind. And that's where we started back in 2008. And thank you very much for sharing your wisdom on the Mindapples tree. Here's one from, I think it was the Playgroup Festival last year. This is one of my favourite five-a-days. Sausages, open-minded people, girls with tails, cold cider on a sunny day, and dancing my socks off. And that really has been as far as we've got with engaging the public a lot of the time. But the point of this deceptively simple, rather silly little thing that we do is actually quite complicated underneath the bonnet, because what we're doing to people is we're saying, hello, you know you have a mind, remember that thing that you take completely for granted? Well, what you do makes a difference to it. Yes? Didn't know that? Okay, well have a think about that. What have you noticed? What have you noticed about it? And then by people sharing what 5 things they do that are good for their mind, we hope to start a better conversation where we actually realise, you know what, I actually am more in control than I thought. I do actually have some kind of agency here. And so that's what we've been doing for quite a long time. For a lot of people, it's the first time we've ever thought about our minds. And so where we started really was there. We have now become, we're a social enterprise, we help people to take care of their minds, and we began as really a social project to get people to talk and think more about this topic. Really with the perspective that if you think about it, the amount of money that is spent is a good indication of what we value in society. I mean, not necessarily. It's quite interesting how disconnected those two things are most of the time, but it's a nice starting point. So if you think about how much worse it is for your mind to fall apart than for your teeth to fall out, how much more damaging it is to your relationships and to your life, how much harder it is to fix, then why do we have an $890 million global dental hygiene market to stop our teeth from falling out, and yet no one is talking about their minds? That's quite odd. And so at Mindapples we say we want to make looking after our minds as natural as brushing our teeth. We want to make this a completely normal thing to talk about. And where that led us to is actually quite an interesting place, because this is actually, this introduction is a talk that I've given many times over the time that I've been running Mindapples. It's actually the last time I'm going to do it, because we've evolved beyond this term mental health now. Because actually what we found is that even being the perky, fun, weird, apple-shaped end of a sector that everybody is terrified of is actually less effective than what we really want to be talking about, which is how is your mind? Is it doing what you want? What do you need to know about it in order to get what you need out of your life? And to be here at an Action for Happiness event, this is the relationship that we have with, I guess, what Mark and Action for Happiness are doing is that I'm not here as a happiness campaigner, but what I am aware of is that whatever you want to achieve in your life, whether you want to be happier, whether you want to be a better mum, or a better policeman, or pass your exams, it's quite useful to know more about how your mind works, because you're probably going to need it to do any of these things. And that's what I'd like to talk to you about today. I'd like to talk to you about your mind. We do training events now with large companies to help people learn more about their minds in order to be more effective at work, and we also are looking at this in education and in healthcare. And we call it Your Mind a User's Guide, because the way that we're approaching it is a bit like, imagine if you were shipped without the manual, and then the manual arrives in the post, and it's like, oh right, that's what that button does. Oh, okay, fine, now I get it. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take practical insights from psychology and neuroscience that give us insights into how we work and how we can live. And we don't particularly aspire to change people. What we'd like is for everyone to understand themselves better. And that's my journey. I'm not trying to engineer myself to be a particular way. What I want is to understand how I work and what I need to do in order to take care of myself and to do the things I want to do. Make sense? Anybody in the wrong room? No one here for Excel training? Good. Okay, would you like to learn about your minds a little bit? A little bit? A little bit? Just a little bit? Yes? By show of apathy? Come on. Who wants to learn about their minds? Yeah! Excellent. So, what we're going to cover, actually those timings are a little bit off, we'll make it up as we go along. We're going to cover a few things. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of the mind, because just to give you a sense of my background, I'm actually a historian by training. I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a neuroscientist. What I've been doing is working with psychologists and neuroscientists and people like the Institute of Psychiatry to pull together what is known about the mind that we think is practically useful for people. And so my interest is in the communication of this stuff. And so I looked at all this and I thought, I'm a historian. What I'm interested in is the story of our relationships with our minds, and I'm going to show you a few things about how your mind works and talk a bit about what we assumed was true and what we now think is true. Put this into a bit of a context. Then we're going to do a little exercise around mood regulation. I'm going to talk to you about your feelings. It's all right, this is a safe space. And then we're going to do a little bit of a game together where we realise just how much influence we are having on each other just by sitting in a room together, and how much influence I'm having on you just by staring at you. And that's going to be quite frightening for everyone involved. So let's plough straight into this, into a brief history of your mind. And what we're essentially looking at from an evolutionary perspective, bigger brains are the key to our evolutionary success. We are not stronger or bigger than the other animals. We are cleverer. And the reason that we've become the dominant species is because we grow these incredibly large brains. In fact, our young are effectively born immature. Our young are born much earlier in the cycle of brain development and in physical development than most species, because our brains go so big that we can't actually get them out. So nature has found a way of producing these children quicker. And actually, you know, all the women in the audience, thank you for the very wide hips. That was very helpful. We outgrew all the other chimpanzees because we were able to have children with much bigger heads. And that's basically why we're the dominant species. It's really quite a prosaic thing when you think about it, isn't it? We've got very big heads, and so we won. But what it tells you is that actually brain growth is the key to our evolution, because what's happened is that we have become much smarter, and various bits have been bolted onto our brains that have enabled us to outthink the other species. But that doesn't mean that our brains just came from nowhere. In fact, let's tell you about the evolution of your mind, which is that we started out with the primal functions. So this is what some neuroscientists call the reptile part of their brain. And this is really all of the stuff that you need in order to just stay alive. It's not very much fun being a lizard, but they get the job done. They're cold-blooded, so this isn't even where you get to regulating body temperature, but this is how aroused you are, how alert you are, basically being able to kind of eat things and reproduce. It's kind of what happens at about 11:15 on a Saturday night. And what then happened, many animals have an emotional system, of which we are one of many animals that have emotional systems, and this is really a part of the brain that is dealing with happiness, emotional responses like sadness, disgust, and behavioural responses like aggression, risk-taking, and pleasure, reward, motivation, and also body movement and temperature. So a lot of the things that we take for granted exist in this bit. And there will be various people who tell you which bits of the brain do which bit. I have no idea, and frankly, anybody who does know, they don't really. We're just trying to figure it out. But there are various things where we think this bit does this, but we're not quite sure yet. And we're trying to map the brain at this point. And then the bit that we have that most species don't have very much is the rational part, the neocortex. That's the bit that we needed the extra space for. And what we've done really is we've bolted on this rational part of ourselves onto essentially an animal brain. And it allows us to do planning and organising and problem solving. And it also is the part of our language, our social learning. So chimpanzees have parts of this. You know, it's not like we're the only people with it, but ours got much cleverer, so we're able to articulate things in a more persuasive way, and it gives us this capacity for abstract thought. So if you ever hear people talking about mindfulness, meditation, it's partly to turn this bit off because it's really, really noisy. If only we could go back to just having that, wouldn't that be so much more peaceful? But it's actually very useful to have this. And to place this in the historical context, this is a brief history of our relationship with our minds. And we, in this country, and it's different in different cultures, but certainly in the UK, in America, we come from a Judeo-Christian view of ourselves. And where we start with that is that we've got this notion of the body and the flesh is weak and sinful, and it drags us into base animal pleasures. And then we have our soul. We don't have a mind, we have a soul. And our soul is that intangible, ephemeral part of ourselves that is lifted up to heaven, to the angels, and that's the bit that we must aspire to be. And then in the Enlightenment, there was this realization that actually we didn't need this concept of the soul anymore. So what happens is that we replace the soul with reason. And so we start talking about how rational we are. And so you end up with a situation where you've got a lot of people wandering around going, I am very rational, I am civilized, I play cricket, it's amazing, look how incredibly rational I am. And we will go around the world and we will civilize all of these other people because they are savages, because they don't play cricket. And we will teach them to play cricket in order to become like the angels. And we're still basically in that same dualism. We're still basically going, the flesh is sinful and bad, and the mind or the soul or the rational part of us is wonderful. And what we discovered during the 20th century, with the advent not only of psychotherapy and psychology, but also of marketing and PR, is that people who think that they're perfectly rational are very easy to sell shoes to. And over the course of the 20th century, our view of ourselves as being perfectly rational creatures has completely dissolved into a mass of failed economic principles and very, very large cupboards with a lot of shoes in that we're not quite sure why we bought. And this is really where we're at. And what we've realized over many, many decades now of brain research is that it's actually, this dualism doesn't work. Because actually, whether you look at it as right brain and left brain, which is still essentially the same dualism, or the old brain, that primal part of us, versus the new brain, the neocortex, what you still end up with is the same dualism. And the truth is, we're all of it. We're the whole thing. We're all of these three, all in one. And actually, even more so than that, we're not even just our brain. There's a whole load of research into embodied cognition, which is starting to show that we've got a lot of neurons, a lot of sensory apparatus, a lot of thinking power in the whole of our body. And there's a lot of things going on that aren't even just up here. It's all wired together, and it's very interesting. No one's really quite sure what the hell's going on. It's honestly, I've no idea. I mean, you think I'm not enough of an expert. No, I'm just honest enough. It's really weird. So I'm going to show you a few things. I'm just going to give you a little tour of your own minds. Let's play some games together, okay? Now, first question, are you rational? Yes. Yes. All right, good. Thank you for playing. So, what would you choose? You're buying a subscription to The Economist, and these are your choices. An online subscription is $59, a print subscription is $125, and an online and print subscription is $125. What looks best there? Online and print? First one. So online, we had some for online and a few for online and print. Raise your hands if you'd go for online only. Interesting. And raise your hands if you go for online and print. Okay. Oh, where's the other slide? Oh, come on, there you go. What about now? Just online for $59 or online and print for $125? Online? Hands up if you choose online? Most of you? Okay. What they discovered is that by adding the third option, you can shift people's choices. So the things that they were interested in is studying the $59 online subscription and the $125 online and print. If you have an option in the middle, then 84% of people choose the expensive option, $125 for online and print. If you don't have that middle option, then the majority switch and buy the cheap one. We were doing this in a major financial institution this morning, and a guy said, I'm one of the people who did that, and actually every time the copy of The Economist arrives through the post, it goes straight in the bin and I read it on my iPad. Oh, good. Feeling rational now? No, I'm not actually. And this is true of all kinds of strange things. So choice architecture is getting very interesting. So we're faced with several graded options. We tend to go to the middle one. We definitely don't go for the lowest, and usually not the highest either. We'll go for somewhere in the middle, in location and in value. So those of you who like to eat out in restaurants, a couple of people have told me now that actually if you are looking to buy a good wine, what you'll find is most people will choose the second cheapest bottle of wine. And that's usually the cheapest one that they have. That's the one they sell the most of. And it's usually lower quality than the house wine, because house wines are what the restaurant critics order, so they have to be quite good. So if you want to order a good wine, order the cheapest, or order an expensive one. But that bit in the middle, oh, no. Don't think you're rational. You're very easy to sell wine to. And actually, we can overwhelm ourselves with choice. We get choice paralysis. There's an interesting study of when they've presented people with 24 different jars of jam to choose from, no one could figure out what to buy. When they reduced it to just 6, they upped their sales 10 times. Because we just get overwhelmed. If we get overwhelmed, we can't think, and we just go, oh, no, I'm not going to buy any jam. I can't think straight about jam. There's too much jam. Oh my God. I'm not even hungry now. And what happens is with a smaller selection, we actually report greater satisfaction with our choices as well. By limiting people's choice, you can make them feel better about their choices. Very strange. And that's really where we're at. The logic myth, which is propagated largely by classical economists, and which is that we are all independent rational agents, is increasingly being swept away on a tide of behavioural economics and psychology. And the majority of our decisions actually are made subconsciously, and they are made with reference to seemingly irrelevant factors. Some of the things we use that affect our subconscious are very relevant, some of them aren't. And telling the difference is quite hard. And the reason that we have evolved like this is actually very sensible. This is the donkey. And this donkey was proposed by a French philosopher and theologian called Jean Buridan in the 1340s. And this donkey is perfectly rational. This is a perfectly rational donkey. Stay with me, people. And this perfectly rational donkey is placed exactly equidistant between two identically sized piles of hay, or in our case, apples, and starves to death. Because it can't decide. It's got no reason to go for one or the other, and it just sits there going, ah! And actually, our emotional signals are designed to make us take action. They're not necessarily designed to make us make the right choice, but they make us make a choice, because we need to do that to survive. And the evolution is very smart in realizing that on average, some of us will figure it out and we'll all survive, we'll keep going. The last thing you want is inaction. And what happens with patients with brain damage, there have been interesting examples of people who they have brain damage and they report actually being very rational and being completely actually at peace. They're not worried about things. They lose their emotional systems and they're quite relaxed about things. But you present them with a menu and they just stare at it and they can't decide what to have. And these people are paralysed with this choice paralysis. They can't actually get past this notion of, I don't know whether the fish is going to be any good, and I'm not quite sure whether the meat will be, raw enough for me, or, maybe, I don't know. There's so many factors. You can go insane just trying to make rational choices. And so we're designed to just do something. Pick it. Middle one. All right. Okay, middle one. Fine. The things that actually switch us off course are quite interesting, because some of it is, yes, I really want that, that's good. And some of it's just bizarre stuff. So which looks better, apple or muffin? Apple? Muffin? Okay. Which looks better, apple or muffin? Apple. We favour our dominant side. Those of you who are right-handed are more likely to choose the apple now. There, you're more likely to choose the muffin, just because if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, it goes the other way. And anybody who's reading about nudge, I always find it interesting that if you're going to start positioning things in order to make people eat the salad rather than the chips, which is what the government's always talking about, how do you get fat, poor people to eat less chips? That's basically what David Cameron's been trying to figure out for the 2 years in his office. I always wonder what the left-handed people are going to get, because there's a danger of nudging all the left-handed people to be really fat, and all the right-handed people to be really thin. Fight the power. Warm feelings. I don't know if any of you had a drink on the way in here. Those of you who've got bottles of water in your hand. There's a very interesting study about, I think the study involved people in a lift. So you get the participant would be in a lift for a very short amount of time, I think not even speaking to somebody there, and they're told very little about them, and then that person leaves the lift. And then they're asked afterwards, what did you make of that? What judgments did you form about this person, this complete stranger? But they were also given a drink to hold, and only for about 10 seconds while they were in the lift. And the people who had been holding a warm drink reported warmer feelings towards the person. And the people who'd been holding a cold drink felt he was a little bit cold towards them. Still think you're rational? What about judges? Judges are rational, right? They're judges. We trust them to be as rational as possible. They decide our futures, our lives, who lives and dies. But as this recent study shows, justice is what the judge ate for breakfast. And actually, in repeat rulings, in the US this is, what judges find is that the percentage of favourable rulings drops gradually from about 65% on average when the judge starts his session, increasingly towards 0 the closer that judge gets to needing lunch. So if you're going into court, go first thing. Don't go at about 12. Because that judge is just going to send you to the electric chair because he's hungry. Or maybe take him a warm drink and a bagel. I don't know. I don't know if you're allowed to do that. Is that contempt of court? It seems like good psychology to me. And this is really interesting. Even the people who think that they're perfectly rational are displaying these features. And actually, in some ways, that would be my argument to you, is that the people who think they're perfectly rational are the people who are doing it the most, because they're not taking the time to go, you know what, I'm a judge, I really should make sure that I eat regularly, and you know what, I'm actually going to put this decision on hold, I'm going to do it after lunch and see how I feel about it then, because they think that everything that they're thinking is right. And actually, it's much, much safer for people to know that we're a bit mad. And what's going on here is a book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow, which has a wonderful roundup of the research in thinking and decision making. And what he proposes is that the way to think of the brain is in a metaphor of two different systems that are going on, which is an automatic system and a controlled system. The automatic system is fast, it's your subconscious, it's emotional, intuitive, it's often biased, but it comes to conclusions very quickly. And then you've got a controlled system, which is slow and analytical and deliberate. But it's also laborious. And so I'm just going to show you those two systems in your brain, give you a little tour. So let's just shout the names of these colours at me, okay? So first one.
Blue, red, green, brown, purple.
Great, now again.
Purple, brown, red, blue, green.
Good! Second time a little bit slower, a little more. How did you find that? The ones where it's the colour is also the word, much, much quicker. Ones where you're getting conflicting information. What happens in the brain here is you're getting two different bits of information, and one's hitting your subconscious and the other has to be processed through the controlled system, and then you have to figure out what the answer is, so it takes you longer. This was discovered in 1935, and actually it's building on research in the 19th century. It's called the Stroop effect. So we've known about this stuff for quite a while. There's two different systems going on. Let's try some more. What's 5 times 2? 10. Great. Pretty easy, right? Quick. Automatic. Bing! Now, that's the automatic system. Fast and easy, the best guess. And it gets the job done. Now let's try another one, okay? You ready? So a bat and a ball cost £1.10 in total. The bat costs £1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? 10p. 5p. Thank you very much. The ball costs 5p. £1.5 plus 5p means that the bat is worth £1 more than the ball. And what happens there, and if you got it wrong, don't worry. I did this with a bunch of astrophysicists and high-level mathematicians in a technical team at JP Morgan this morning. They got it wrong too. Because our automatic system does that, it just churns out the best guess answer. And unless we feel like, oh, it's a trick question, I better pay attention to it, we will tend to just go, yeah, okay, cool, fine, whatever, and we get it wrong. And so we need to engage our control system. Let's try one more. 187 times 4. 4, so what was that? Automatic system, no compute, no. Automatic, no help here. You know that scene in The Simpsons where Homer is stuck with a difficult question and he goes, come on brain, think of something, and he looks up and the brain just isn't there, and he's like, comes back down and he goes, oh! That's kind of what happens there. So actually what we have to do is we have to go, controlled system, 100 times 4, 80 times 4, 7 times 4. Okay, I've got it. Who got it really quickly? Yeah, a few of you? But you can get there in the end, but I mean, this is why we get kids to practice their times tables. So a guy this morning, he got it very quickly, but that's because he knew the 18 times table. So he did 18 times 4, bang, and then add 28 to it, right, there you go. So that's why we do it. That's the point of that whole piece in our schooling where we were like, why do I have to do this? I have a calculator. We're training our automatic systems to be better at maths. And that's really where the control system comes in, is when the automatic system is wrong. But we have to know to kick it in. But it gets there in the end. The problem is that we have limited attentional capacity. So we have a very limited amount of space in our conscious mind to process these things. So the control system is very clever, but it's one at a time, please. And actually, if we get too much information, we can't process it consciously. We run out of RAM. It doesn't work. And actually, that's the reason that most of our decisions never make it as far as our controlled system, our conscious awareness. 99% of the decisions you make every day are just made, because it's as simple as like, I'm going to walk there, I'm going to walk there, I'm going to walk there. If you can't think about that, you go insane. So whenever people talk to me about faith, I always say, well, we all have faith. I go, no, I don't. I love Richard Dawkins, but I don't have faith in him. No, I just really like him a lot, you know. But actually, what happens is that, of course we have faith. I have faith right now that this stage isn't going to fall down. I have faith that this microphone isn't going to suddenly switch into another dimension and start talking a different speech. I mean, there's so many different things that could go wrong if I really thought it through. I have faith in them all because I've only got a tiny little monkey brain and I don't really know enough to know what's going on, so I trust the people around me to do these things. I trust that the laws of physics will be followed. And this is really what the subconscious is brilliant. The subconscious is brilliant at multitasking. So what you've got actually going on in your mind is you have got a whole load of different things going on. Your heart rate, your breathing is being regulated. You have got a body clock which is telling you how tired you are, when you should sleep, monitoring the light levels. You've also got a to-do list. You've got a whole load of things that you're trying not to forget. They're just squirreled away in the back of your mind. And actually, if you'll notice there's a pink penguin there. Yeah, don't think of pink penguins. Has anyone ever done that to you? It took me ages to figure out what the hell this pink penguins thing was about. I didn't understand it, and I finally understood it now. Which is an experiment called Wegener, which actually used a white bear. And what he discovered is that you can give the subconscious instructions. So if you say, think of a white bear, then the subconscious will set up a process and go, yeah, okay, I'll think of a white bear. But it only works on positive things. So if you say, don't think of a pink penguin, what your subconscious does is it goes, righto boss, I'm going to set up a control protocol for that, and I'm going to check that I'm not thinking of a pink penguin. And the only way I'm going to do that is if I think about a pink penguin all the damn time. Oh my God, I've broken. But that's how powerful it is. We can give it instructions and it holds them for a while, and you wake up at 7 in the morning going, oh, I left the gas on. And sometimes we wake up and you go, no, I didn't. I don't have gas. What the hell's wrong with my subconscious? And because most of the time you're just thinking, oh, I want a muffin. I don't know why, but I've got to have a muffin. But maybe I left the gas on. Oh, I want a muffin. Oh, maybe. That's how we live the whole of our lives. And I want a muffin, but I might have left the gas on. I want a muffin, and it's bewildering. And a guy called Jonathan Haidt, who's an amazing psychologist, who writes a lot about this kind of thing. You may have seen some of his stuff at the RSA in recent years. He likens this in his book, The Happiness Hypothesis, to the elephant and the rider. And this is actually a quote from the Buddha originally, which is the Buddha likened his mind to a wild elephant. An untrained mind is like a wild elephant. And really the purpose of meditation is elephant training. And the reason that Jonathan uses this to illustrate the psychology of how we think is that the important thing about this is two things. One is that you've got still the dualism, you've got the rational bit and the rider, and then you've got the animal bit. But notice the size difference. The irrational bit's a lot bigger. And what the point of this is that the bit that we like to associate with ourselves is the rider. We like to think we're the rational bit. But actually, we wouldn't be going anywhere without the elephant. And if the elephant wants a muffin, elephant's getting a muffin. You're not going to win. And the point of meditation, CBT, Prozac, education, all of these different things are all just tools of training your elephant. And it's worth remembering a little bit of humility when we come to think of ourselves as these rational, forward-thinking, planning, highly cognitive neocortex people, which is that the elephant's in charge, because the only reason that the rider evolved was to help the elephant plan ahead. And so actually that's the point of that cognitive bit, is to help us to plan for the future and remember the past, because that enables us to learn, it enables us to see things coming. So we're the chimpanzees that noticed that the water supply was going to run out soon and moved to a different place. We're the people who could see the advantages of taking that bit of ground rather than somewhere else, because we can see what might happen if someone attacks us. This is the point of the rider. It's there to keep the elephant safe. And if I can leave you with one thing tonight, which it is look after your elephants, people. So I'm going to teach you just a couple of things about how to care for your elephant. And then we can take questions. Would anyone like to take questions now? I recognise there's a lot of stuff. I've got a couple more things that I want to do with you, but if anybody sat there going, oh my God, what the hell is this hippie talking about, then no? Okay, good. Well, so what we do typically with a lot of the Mindapples training is we talk to people about their subconscious mind, and I've started with that long piece about how we take decisions, how we think, to illustrate the importance of something that is often not really noticed, particularly in our work, but also in all kinds of areas of our life, which is that if we're going to train ourselves to be better at thinking, most of it should be focused on our subconscious mind and making sure that's in good shape, not just on making ourselves better at Excel. And actually, if you think about the way education works, a lot of it's about trying to get better at doing things unconsciously. And so we're going to do two things. The first thing is I want to talk to you about your mood. And the second thing I want to talk to you about the way we're influencing each other. And so let's do mood first. So we're going to talk about understanding how your mood changes during the day and how that affects your life and work. And we're going to talk about the subconscious actions that you are taking to manage your mood and identify some positive actions which work for you that you can build into your routine. Have we got a roaming mic? We're going to need it for this bit. Not any huge rush, but just to know it's there is good. Thank you. So, mood. Mood is a fabulous word. We use the term mood a lot in our everyday language. We talk about it as, he's in a bad mood today, or I'm in such a good mood, or, she's moody. And that is about as far as we get with it normally, and we never stop to think really about what it means. The way that psychologists will typically define the word mood is that it is a persistent state of emotion. So if your emotional responses are the things that you're reacting to immediately, then your mood state is the kind of background level. So you might be emotionally angry because someone bumped into you on the train on the way here. But your mood state is the kind of background feeling of irritation that made you more likely to be angry about that today, when on another day you might just have shrugged it off. And it's at the root of a lot of what positive psychology is talking about, understanding our mood states. And typically, psychologists will often talk about good moods and bad moods, the positive effect and the negative effect. What we've found is actually it's quite helpful to think of it in a slightly more pragmatic way, which is based on the work of a guy called Robert Thayer, who is a psychologist who wrote a book called The Origins of Everyday Moods in 1996. And he proposes a theory of mood which is based on two different factors, which is your level of energy and your level of tension. And he says that between those two axes, that is where we will figure out what kind of state that we're in. And anybody who's ever worked in consulting will know that the whole of reality can be explained by graphs with quadrants on them. So this is the mood quadrant thing that makes us feel safe about our subconscious mind. So I hope, our gift to you, it's all okay, that we've got a graph for it. So I just want to kind of ask people, do these sort of resonate with you? And just talk around what the different states are. So what Thayer is saying is that it's easier to tune into your moods if you think of both of these axes. So most people have a sense of how calm or how tense they are, and how energetic and how tired they are. And so we're just going to check if the combined states make sense. So over here, in the nice calming blue section, then you've got relaxation. We've called it that. This is the state when you are tired and also calm. What kind of things do you associate with doing when you're in that kind of state? Sitting down, sleeping. What else? Probably this moment right now. Tension levels going up the more I look around. People in the front row, how are your tension levels? Holidays, maybe? This is the kind of rest stage. This is where we go, I've done everything. Okay, God, I'm tired. Asleep. And this is the recharge zone. This is where the reason that companies want you to take holiday is because you need to rest, you need to recharge, and you need to get away from the stresses and the tension in order to be able to recharge your energy levels. Let's go up the quadrants. So stay with that calm feeling. You've just got back from holiday, and let's take the energy levels up. And we've called this optimal performance. This is that's just, again, our term for it. What do you associate with doing when you're feeling really calm and full of energy? Exercise? What else? Sex. Thank you. Not for the sex, sorry. That sounds really weird, I apologise. What else? Planning. Very good. Yeah, okay, cool. So concentrating on planning for the future, but big picture. Winning and succeeding. Yes. Cooking. Yeah. Running. Swimming. Anyone say music? Yeah. I mean, so music it's another classic one we get people saying a lot. This state is what positive psychologists mostly corresponds to what they would call the flow state, which is the stage where you can really concentrate on things. It's not the same research, but you can see how it's sort of similar to that stage, where you can really, really put your mind to something. You've got loads of energy and you're not worried about lots of stuff. Your elephant is happy. There's no gas on. It's had a muffin. It can concentrate. Let's go over here then. Let's stay with that high energy state. I'm afraid I'm going to take your tension levels up though. Get tenser and tenser and tenser, but still really energetic. What do you associate with doing in that state? Arguing, exams, work. Yeah? Just by show of hands, how many of you at work spend most of your time in this state? Yeah? Okay, a few. How many of you spend your time in this state? A few of you. Okay. Where we can concentrate most is obviously when we're not distracted, when we're not tense. So a lot of the work we do in workplaces is about helping people to stay in that high-performing state. It's possible to be very effective here, like competitive sports, for example. You can be very tense and wired up and do stuff, and you can be very effective there. The problem is that when you start dropping your energy levels, you end up here. And let's talk about this. The red box of discomfort. Ooh. Tired and tense. That point where you are exhausted and you are worried about everything. Is this a familiar place? Yeah? What do you associate with doing in this state? Work. Children having a tantrum in the middle of the night. Traffic jams, yeah. Drinking, yeah. So this is really the nub of the whole piece on mood regulation. What Thea's work is all about is that this state here, this tense, tired state, is incredibly uncomfortable, and we'll do pretty much anything to get out of it. And what he basically says is that we spend most of our time unconsciously managing our levels of tension and energy in order to keep ourselves out of discomfort. And so what I could say to you about mood right now is I am not going to tell you you should manage your moods. What I'm going to tell you is you manage your moods. I would like to know how you are managing your moods. You'll notice that Mindapples is mostly based on questions with 5 answers to them. We've done it again for mood. That's our contribution. Their quadrant diagrams work for PwC. We have 5 questions with 5 answers. So just by kind of general shouting out, we won't get you to sort of do this. When we do this in kind of smaller groups, we get people to write down 5 things and actually reflect. And I think it's very important for us to take a moment and just reflect on that. But just think about what it is. What are you doing? Let's take the first column first. What do you do to raise your energy levels? Eat, have a coffee, exercise, sleep, socialize, listen to music, have sugar, meditate, play with kids, coffee, sex, complex carbohydrates. Not stupid carbohydrate. No. Complex carbohydrates, very good source of energy. There's a lot of nutrition actually. I mean, I'm trying to figure out what our nutritional balances are, and water, all kinds of things like that. We do a lot of things to raise our energy levels. What about let's just talk about tension here. So let's just shout out socially acceptable things you do to reduce your tension. Watch TV. I heard this. I haven't been able to find the reference for it, but I heard that when you watch TV, your heart rate goes lower than when you're asleep. It's actually it's a calmer state. It's avoidance. Yeah. Switching off. What else do you do to release tension? Tell people about it. Talking to people about it. Exercise. Again, can come up in both columns, right? Some of these things work for both. What was there was one over here I missed? Singing. Yes. Have a bath. Draw. Play music, playing an instrument, nature, meditate again. Be creative. I was asked, I don't know if you know the 5 Ways to Wellbeing, the New Economics Foundation's kind of 5 a day for the mind. Obviously they stole the whole idea of us, it's entirely our idea. No, okay, maybe not. But I was asked what would, based on the Mindapples responses, what would I add to the 5 ways? What would I add to the, what was it? Take notice, give, stay connected, learn. I can't remember the last one. Take notice. What I said was self-expression. The bit that comes through incredibly strongly when we do the Mindapples surveys and trees around the place is making things, doing stuff creatively is a really important part of it. And the way that my friend Charlie puts it is that every one of us is just trying to get the tiny, ugly, beautiful part of ourselves that we think of ourselves as the real us out into the world in a way that doesn't destroy it or shame it, and making a little thing and going, ooh, look, ooh, people liked it. Ooh, okay, good. People liked my Mindapple card. It's all good. This is the creative process, you know. And that's, you know, so what we would normally do if we were in a smaller group is we'd spend a bit of time thinking about this. I invite you to think about this, you know, make a couple of lists of the things that you do that raise your energy levels and the things that you do that reduce your tension levels, and notice what else you're doing. You know, over the course of, you don't learn about your mind from listening to a guy like me talking about it. You learn about your mind from being in your mind and living your life and noticing things. So just notice during your day, what are you doing that's actually about managing your mood state that you previously thought was because of some kind of rational choice, but actually is probably because you're trying to manage your subconscious. What Thair's research basically reveals is that he did a lot of studies on what we do, what we say we do to manage our moods, and the list of things that we do to raise our energy and reduce our tension, particularly when we're in this tense, tired, discomforted state. Some of it, yes, is positive things: exercise, yoga, meditation, drinking water, taking walks, spending time with family. But there's also pretty much every public health problem in this country is in that list. That's when we reach for the cigarettes to calm us down, the coffee to wake us up, the alcohol to unwind, the narcotics to raise our energy levels into euphoria for a Saturday night. This is also shoes. You know, this is why we buy a lot of shoes, to manage our mood. We like to think this is not true, but we know it is actually true. And that's really, I guess, the thing that we're trying to do with this piece on mood regulation, is to raise our collective consciousness about why we do the things that we do. We are trying to manage our minds. We don't talk about it. We can get better at it. We would like to know, through the Mindapples tree and through these exercises, what you do. And I invite you to notice what you do during the day. So take notice of the changes in your mood throughout the day, specifically your levels of energy and tension. And notice the actions that you're taking. You can think of a few now, but you'll notice loads during the day, over the next week or so. And if you consciously build, and this is what Thair's arguing really, is if you consciously build the positive actions that you've identified into your routine, you can keep yourself out of that discomfort state. And that makes it easier to go without the cigarettes or without the, you know, the fatty foods or whatever it is you're doing. It's not by any means a cure. This is not a magic wand, but it's a useful insight into why we do these things. We don't smoke cigarettes for our physical health, right? We do it for our minds. And that's why, you know. So actually we're doing loads of things for our minds. Make sense? So, we've talked a lot about individuals, your relationship with yourself, your mind, how we see ourselves, the way that we navigate the world. But we're actually social creatures. And so the last thing I want to talk to you about is how we are influencing each other. And so we're going to talk about the biology of emotional influence, understand how the subconscious triggers that we give out can influence our mood, our energy and tension levels, and understand how we can apply this knowledge to positively influence our colleagues, our friends. And so I just want to invite you to just imagine with me. I want you to imagine that you take a lemon and you cut the lemon and the juice runs down your arm. You tear the lemon in half and you take that half of juicy lemon and you bite into it and the juice runs down your neck. Who's salivating now? Yeah? Who's got a slight sense of puckering? Ooh, lemon. I quite like lemon, though some people really don't. What's going on there is you are able to empathise with that imagined scene. And you're experiencing quite visceral reactions sometimes. Your body is doing things differently as a result of something that I'm telling your mind. And this is the other way around now. This is the effect of the conscious mind on the subconscious. And what's going on there is actually a very interesting piece of neuroscience from a couple of decades ago, which is all about monkeys. I love this photo. My training colleague Natalie found this photo. And she couldn't be here with us today, so this is in honour of her. This is hi, Natalie. So there was a load of experiments done on monkeys. And like neuroscientists like to experiment on monkeys. I have a friend called Matt, he's a neuroscientist. He tortures monkeys for a living. It's his thing. There was a group of neuroscientists in Parma in Italy in the 90s who were looking at the motor neurons of monkeys. They were trying to find out which bit of a monkey's brain is the bit that controls movement. So they had all these monkeys wired up to brain scanners, and they got them to eat peanuts, and they were studying their brain activity whilst they were eating the peanuts. And then one day, one of the neuroscientists got peckish, and he ate one of the peanuts from the monkey's tray. And the monkey watched him intently, and to their great surprise, the monkey's brain activity fired in the same pattern as if the monkey had eaten the peanut itself. So without the monkey doing anything, its motor neurons seemed to be firing. Just from watching someone eat the peanut, it had had the experience of eating the peanut. And they thought this was a mistake. And it led to a series of follow-up experiments which ultimately became the experiments that discovered mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are a part of the brain which is still disputed about exactly what's this is a part of the brain, the neurons that fire in sympathy for the things that we see other people experiencing. Not just even other people, other species, you know. And this has become quite a big deal in neuroscience, because what we've discovered is that mirror neurons are at the heart of our empathy system, they're at the heart of how we learn, they're at the heart of social contact, and actually they're also at the heart of things like the way that we enjoy sports and performance art, why we go to the theatre, is we watch people experiencing emotional drama. I mean, why do we care? Someone else, right? But we go through a little bit of it, around 20% of the level of intensity, roughly. And it varies from between men and women. Generally, they're sort of discovering that women have slightly more mirror neuron reactions than men, so there's a kind of greater empathy on that side. It varies very much from person to person, but it's definitely some kind of gender bias there. But it's in all of us. So it's why when we watch the Olympics and we see Jess Ennis win the gold, or Mo Farah, we get excited. We see them being really excited, and we get excited, and we jump up and down, and we have a really lovely time. Woo, isn't it great? Wonderful. Boris Johnson's amazing. Why did I think of him? I don't know. But it's contagious. This emotion is contagious. So I just want to play a little game with you. I'm going to show you a series of faces, and I want you to make the face. Okay? This is a safe place. It's okay. There is no judgment here. And I can't see anyway. The lights are too bright. So I'm going to take it on trust that you're going to mirror these faces, all right? Ready? Okay. Come on, front row, I'm looking at you. Cool. It's all right, you can stop now. Thank you. How did you find that? Fun? Interesting? Did it have an effect? Did you feel anything? What did you feel? What did you notice about how you felt during that? Silly? Embarrassed? Did you notice anything? Lighter as they went on. Yeah. The first half of the faces are sad and angry, miserable. And the second half are all happy. And you may have noticed a slight shift in your mood from down into up. And I noticed the room went very quiet halfway through the sad faces. It's quite interesting, the effect it has on a room. Now let's try it again. I'm just going to show you the same faces. But this time I want you to keep a complete poker face. I want no emotional reaction at all. Okay. How did it feel that time?
Impossible to stay poker-faced. Smiles contagious.
Smiles are contagious. It's impossible to stay poker-faced. Did you notice the same emotional impact? Not as much. More objective. Yeah. What's interesting about the mirror neuron research is that what happens, this is one of the experiments that they use to study mirror neurons. What happens in your brain is actually in terms of patterns, pretty much exactly the same both times. It doesn't actually matter if you make the face. The emotional impact of that is still happening in your brain, and you can override it with a conscious level, your controlled system, but it's actually, your automatic system is responding first. And actually what happens is you can measure this, where they showed a group of students these kind of faces. This is actually an earlier experiment, trying to understand micro-expressions and emotional reactions. What you can see is if you try and keep a poker face, you can actually see, if you show people happy faces, you can see electrical activity happening in their cheeks. And if you show angry faces, then you get electrical activity in the brow. Even if you're very, very good at keeping a poker face, you'll still, your subconscious is going, no, ooh, smiley, ooh, kid, oh. No, controlled mind wants me to be quiet now. Sorry, Ryder. I was just an enthusiastic elephant. And what this has led to is a lot of discussions about empathy and how we tune into each other. And actually, there's a whole load of studies on this now, in the workplace particularly. But there have been studies done of meetings. If you've ever been in board meetings or meetings with a whole bunch of people, what happens is after a couple of hours, your biorhythms will synchronize. So as we sit in this room together, our heart rates are starting to synchronize, and our breathing patterns are starting to synchronize. And actually, our moods are starting to kind of come into line. And that's part of my job being up here, is to try and lead that and guide that. There have been studies done of different work teams across, I think, 70 different groups, which are showing that the moods of teams track together over time. So the whole team will become depressed for a week. The whole team will have a really happy week. And actually it gets as extreme as that you can sit 3 people in a room facing each other in complete silence, and within 2 minutes the most emotionally expressive person will have transferred their mood onto the other 2. That's how natural it is for us to tune in. And what this is part of is what is often known as the open loop system in the brain, which is that closed loop systems, some brains, they will regulate their emotional state in isolation. And that's a closed loop. We aren't wired like that. We're an open loop. Our brains are constantly making reference to the people around us to see what's the appropriate mood. How should I be feeling? What's the group doing? This is hardwired into us. To the point where actually it's quite easy to be out of step with the group, and it's also, if you're aware of this, you can start tuning into it. There's a technique in NLP which is called pacing and leading. And we've talked a little bit about this in business context, because what managers often ask is, well, how can I step in and keep the mood of the team up? And once they've dealt with the fact that every time they walk into the office in a bad mood, they're depressing everybody. Once they get past that kind of, oh God, I really need to drink more coffee and stop being miserable. What people start asking is, how can I positively influence my team? And actually, in pacing and leading, it's about tuning in first. So you can't just come in and go, hey, it's all great, isn't it? If your team are currently in the middle of a redundancy program and they hate you, because they will probably punch you in the face. They should. It's bad. But what you can do is, imagine if you are in a car and you've just knocked a cyclist off their bike and they're uninjured but they're shaken up. If you come out of the car and you're like, hey, what's the matter? It's all fine. You're all right. No problem, is it? Hey. Then they'll be very angry. They'll be very agitated and very angry with you. Whereas if you step out of the car and you match their mood and you say, oh my God, are you all right? Oh, I'm so sorry. That was terrible. It was such a near miss, but we're so lucky. Are you okay? Do you want anything? And then you consciously slow your breathing down. You can calm that person down. But you have to match first. And then you can use that way of influencing each other to help people in agitated states, in unhappy states. So it's interesting, if you think about it in work, how much you pick up the stress from the people around you. But also, if you manage teams or if you are in any kind of position of influence, then think about how you can tune into your team and help to kind of lift the spirits in a sensitive way. And what this is all about, really, this is kind of where we're at. That if you want to be effective in your life and work, you need to manage your conscious and your subconscious mind. And I hope that was evident from the decision-making stuff. By being more conscious of how you feel, you can take better decisions and manage the impact of stress. Our feelings are influenced by our daily actions and by the actions and moods of the people around us. So what we do makes a difference, and what the people around us do make a difference. We are in this together. And so this is not just some isolated individualist thing. This is about all of us as a society getting more literate about our minds, understanding how we work. And what the mirror neurons and these emotional open loop systems is teaching us is that really, if you go back to where we started, thinking about the evolution of the human mind, the reason that we are the dominant species on this planet is because we have these highly developed brains. And the only reason that we can grow these highly developed brains is because our young take longer to mature than any other species. And so the reason that we have outcompeted all of the other people in the evolutionary game is not because we were more vicious, not because we competed in horrible ways, but because we cooperated. Because we formed societies and families and social units, and we looked after each other. So the reason that we have become the success that we are is because we love each other. And the neuroscience is starting to prove it. And on that, I will leave you. Thank you. If anyone has questions, then I'm happy to take questions. However, I will also be sticking around afterwards. So if your question is just too confusing or too dangerous to share in public, I'll be here. But if you have a question you would like to share with the group, then I'm very happy to talk to you.
Hello.
Hello.
Do you not think that animals love as much as human beings do, but in a different way?
Animals do love, yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't know much about the details of it, but it's a good point. I mean, it's not by any means that we are better at cooperating. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that without that cooperation, we would not have been able to evolve as we had. So there are actually many species that are better at cooperating than we are. So I mean, there are ants who are born and give up the entirety of their life to have their body used as a feed sack and a storage for all the other ants, and that's all they ever do their whole life. And that's a level of self-sacrifice to the greater common good that is far beyond anything that we manage. But it's certainly true that without that ability to cooperate, we wouldn't have been able to have young that are so immature. And it's part of there's an argument around the evolution of where we've come from, which is where we were originally thought to evolve from chimpanzees, which is somewhat aggressive. But actually there's a bonobo theory, which is that there's more passive and loving forms of higher primate that we may have evolved from as well, or instead of, that have displayed these characteristics of taking care of each other. And the story of evolution may not be about us being more aggressive and horrible than the others, but actually about being more caring. So I agree absolutely that there are many species that could teach us a thing or two. So, what else? Yes.
It's interesting that, although I don't know this lady, I was about to ask you exactly the same question. You talked about the contribution of shoe therapy to happiness.
Of shoe therapy? Of shoe therapy,
yes. But my experience is that this really only works for women. I wonder if you have a similar suggestion that might help men.
Well, we've certainly got enough data now. We should probably produce a report on that from all the thousands of Mindapples we've collected. I would hesitate to say Xbox, but there's always something in that. I mean, the sort of sometimes if I've got a friend who's a big gamer, and we talk a lot about computer games, and occasionally there are times when it's like, well, how are you feeling at the moment? Well, actually, to be honest, Colin, I spent the whole day shooting things in the face, and now I feel a bit better. And it's sort of, there is something about that kind of that other world. I think there's a lot of gender differences, but they tend not to be specific to the actual biology of it. It tends to be a lot of cultural constructs. We were talking this morning, actually, in this session about how the idea that men are very driven by status in order to get a mate, and that women less so, is actually increasingly starting to look like it's being reversed. That increasingly it's starting to go the other way, and that women are increasingly looking for status and attracting men because men are more attracted to women in powerful positions. So there's a lot of behavioural stuff that we can just play with. The main thing that we want to do is to get everyone talking about it. And so that's also why I don't stand here and say, this is what you should do. What I say is, there are a whole bunch of people here who are sharing what they've figured out, and I would much rather that we were like Amazon recommendations than the Richard and Judy book list. I'd rather that you got advice from somebody who you think is like you. But yeah, no, that would be, I mean, I personally, I think that's why pubs were invented. So, you know, what happens if, you know, lady goes off, buys shoes, comes and meets the guy in the pub. You know, lady gets drunk, leaves the shoes, but the job was done. Both sides got happy. Women used to not be allowed to go into pubs. I suppose so. I wasn't around then, though, unfortunately, but I say unfortunately, that's a very terrible thing to say. But yeah, I mean, there's interesting stuff around gender, around single-sex groups. I'm interested in the men's movement and how that relates to feminism, and how actually having time involved in single-sex groups allows people the space to explore, you know, different things that they need to look after themselves. And I think that's another debate to be had on another occasion. But you can see where, I mean, there's so much that we don't talk about here, which is really interesting and fun to talk about, and that's why we started Mindapples, to create a space where we can talk about what we've all learnt about this. Did that answer your question? Or do you want? Yeah, okay. I can recommend some stuff. We'll have a look at the Mindapples tree, figure out what else we can do besides shoes. Anything else? What else? Yes. Yep. There's a mic just.
Thank you. Fascinating talk. Thank you. I found the four blocker between using tension and energy very interesting. Yeah. Do you differentiate at all in that, or did Thayer differentiate between high positive energy and high negative energy? Because you can be angry or excited, and I don't think those two things are equal in terms of reducing discomfort.
It's a good point. Actually, what we've been using Thayer's work, but that's one of kind of four dominant theories of mood. The other three all use that sense of positive and negative. So we've picked out tension and calmness as a way of talking about mood, because that, I think, I mean, you should talk to some of my team about this. They know more about the papers that it's based on than I do, but it's around sort of 80% of mood states can be represented in Thayer's model, but actually the broader picture is to talk about energy and positive and negative. So actually you can be in a very, very heightened state and be really excited, and you can also be in a really heightened state and really, really distressed. And that's actually how the full map goes. But mood research is going more and more into emotional research, and the two concepts are coming together. So actually what you end up then is, we do this in the sort of fuller trainings to talk about positive thinking, negative thinking, and that's where it ends up. But the starting point for us is to think about tension, because that's the bit that people are generally willing to share with people around them, and it's also a useful thing to tune into if you're not very kind of aware of what's going on in yourself. So I'd say start with the tension and energy, and then start, once you feel like you've tuned into that, then it can get a bit more complicated. But yeah, you're right, absolutely. Yeah. Yes,
thank you very much as well. Very enjoyable. Just a couple of things that came to mind. One was, first of all, thinking in terms of washing the teeth, washing the mind.
Or brainwashing, as they call it.
Well, I think brain cleansing is something that repeatedly comes down through the ages and different spiritual paths, which is an examination of conscience, ideally on a daily basis, if we can remember to do it, as a way of sort of cleaning out, so that we don't have things niggling away in our subconscious or unconscious mind, and to eliminate guilt or anger or whatever, to resolve issues. And reduce the inbox mentally. And to what extent has that come up in your work, particularly say in companies? And secondly was, it's just gone to me now. Oh yeah, on mirror neurons, where there's research being done by guys out of McGill in Canada on mind habits, where they get people to click on photographs of themselves and on happy smiley faces and dark and angry faces, and it's all about training the mind towards the smile, where your name is put up as a reference, so that you're training the mind to look for the smile, so that even if you're in a city of 95% of the people are unhappy and looking dour, that you're beginning subliminally to train the mind 5 to 10 minutes a day to look for the smile. And they're finding that it's dropping things like blood pressure, it's having effect on mood. and they're trying to, I think, get that into corporates as well.
It's interesting. I mean, quite a few people said it, that the sort of smiles are a bit more contagious than the sadder faces in that experiment, and that tends to be slightly how we're biased. And it's very interesting how stress states can actually alter our perception of situations. That's another thing we talk about a lot, is that the cognitive distortions that come in with when you're in a negative frame of mind, is you tend to notice more of the negative things, and if you're in a positive state of mind, you notice more of the positive things, and you can retrain yourself and sort of step back. And it sounds like a very good example of doing that. I'll talk a little bit about that, but firstly, were you asking about spirituality in terms of where that comes up in our work on that first part?
It doesn't necessarily have to be the
sort of moral dimension to it.
Clearing the conscience.
I think conscience is a very interesting word to be using in the context of emotion and happiness and all of these things, because actually I think, yes, absolutely. I think one of the reasons that people resonate with the work that we do is because we're not trying to tell people that they should feel good, because actually sometimes there are good reasons why you feel bad. And if you see what I mean, that actually what we've got is quite often our values have been violated, or we feel we've violated our own values. And you can see the way that we're wired socially, that's a very important part of our nature, is to be checking around to see what the rest of the group will think of our actions, and to feel worried about that. I'm quite interested in the concept of shame. And someone gave me a really good definition of shame once, which is it's the feeling that what you've done is so terrible that you'll be thrown out of the tribe. And that's a very primal thing, because actually that could mean you die if you're thrown out of the tribe in an ancient context, in an evolutionary context. And so I'm interested in the evolutionary and biological drivers that are then also seen in spiritual contexts, and how those two relate. And I don't really have an answer for you, but this book, The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, is a lovely book for that, because what he's done in it is to take the wisdom of ancient spirituality, contemporary religion, philosophy, and to match that against what the science is telling us, and it's often proving us right in terms of our instincts and the way that we've told stories to get people to behave in appropriate ways. And a lot of the things that we have as a society valued for spiritual reasons have also been valued for other reasons in other societies, and it gets very interesting. I don't know, I'm not religious, so I don't make any claim to know about the sort of spiritual side of how we behave, but I think it's very interesting how much overlap there is. Just on the positive versus negative point, there's one interesting thing. So Mark and I were at a conference about happiness at the weekend, and we were talking a lot about the relationship between Mindapples and the action for happiness, and I found myself on a panel talking about whether we can learn to be happy. And one of the things that I ended up saying was that actually, if you look at individuals, there is a lot of correlation between positive thinking, positive outlooks, and life chances. So you will do better in work, you will get more promotions, you will do better in all kinds of areas. Your life will be better if you're positive, if you're a yes person rather than a no person. But if you look in the evolutionary line of it, actually, there are good reasons for anxiety and for negativity and for misery, which is, the people who were keeping an eye on the bushes were probably the people who spotted the lion coming and kept us alive. And we've got a very specific, interesting moment in our society now, where actually the way that our society has grown, and we're so much safer now, that evolutionary value of the caution and anxiety and worry is becoming less and less obvious to us. But as a hive mind, we're basically designed to be quite smart. So we're sort of about 50-50 positive to negative people. It's a very nice spread. And actually, if you take about risk-taking behaviours, so whether you will go towards things and try it out, or whether you'll run away, where actually that splits along gender biases as well. So women will be slightly more likely to be cautious under stress, and men will be slightly more likely to take more risks. So, which overall, as a society, would mean that there will be some people who will go, I think there's food over there, I'm going to have a look. And then there will be some people who go, I'm not sure, there was something that moved in the bushes, I'm going to stay here. And actually, overall, we get food and we keep enough people safe, and that was very well designed into us. But it's actually in this context now, it's the argument for why there should be more women in corporate boardrooms. Because what you've got is the whole of the City of London under massive amounts of pressure, and most of them are men, and they're all going, I think we need to roll with this, we need to take more risks, we need to gamble this, we've got to fight our way out of this. And what we need is a few people going, oh, we could slow down. Hello. And we're designed to be diverse. We're designed to have a diversity of personalities and thinking patterns, because we're designed to be a hive-minded social group. So, how are we for time? Have we got time for a couple more?
Let's do 2 more, Andy.
2 more? Okay, good. One here?
Yeah, just thinking about personality type, and if you, I don't know if there's a correlation between the mind apples, you have the 5 good things you can do, whether people resonate more based on a Myers-Briggs or a personality type that says, yes, those 5 things work for me, versus those 5 things don't work at all. Have you done any work to kind of build in that correlation?
In the context of the mind apple stuff, or the 5 a day. We haven't actually matched it against personality type. We've been developing a personality module in our training, actually, which we haven't sort of launched properly yet, but we've not been looking at Myers-Briggs, actually. We've been looking at the big 5 personality traits. And there's a whole load of research gone on about what people respond well to and what they don't. We haven't matched that, though. I'd love to do some work looking at the different actions that people respond well to and matching that to personality. And that's a thing that we would love to do, and if we have more time. I suspect, though, that it's very culturally biased and it's very personal to people, so I don't know if you'll get as far as these types of actions are good for these types of people, but you might see some quite interesting things in terms of what I'm interested in is, I guess, that recommendations thing, that sense of being able to spot people who are a bit like you and ask them what they think. And find new stuff that you didn't know you could do. So I think that could be quite an interesting way. I just wouldn't want to get deterministic about it, especially because personality traits can change. These things are quite malleable. They're not as fixed as we previously thought. So I used to be really shy. I still am sometimes. Does that answer your question?
I just worry that at a 4-box matrix level, it is very generic. It might work for you, and you might say, well, I just don't get it as a whole because of my personality type, which doesn't tune into those things.
Yeah, we haven't found anybody who can't come up with an answer to the question, what's the 5 a day for your mind? And that's the interesting thing about that question. It's one of those questions which some people go, yes, 5 things, great, I'll write that down. And other people go, there's no hope for me. I don't do anything. And then after a while, you're like, surely you do something. You can say bad things, it's all right. And they're like, all right, eat cake and don't care. It's like, okay, great. And by the end of it, they're talking in a much more, they're realising things that they do. We all do something. We all reach for some stuff, even if it's to cope. I think what you might find is that some people are reaching to cope and other people are proactively managing. And that might vary a lot from person to person, but we all end up doing stuff, which is some of us aren't as in control of it as others.
No, makes sense. Thank you.
One more question? There's one over this side, so we haven't had anyone from this side. It's interesting. I'm wondering if it's to do with the dominant side. I am right-handed. Not sure what that means. There was a. Oh, sorry. Go on. Yes, we've got the microphone. Hello.
What's your highest aspiration for the Mindapples idea?
What a great last question. Thank you. The check's in the post. The highest aspiration for the Mindapples idea, actually, it nicely corresponds to what I was going to say at the end here. So here's Adam and Eve at the secret garden party under the Mindapples tree. The aspiration that I had when I started out with Mindapples was about changing the conversation around mental health. I'm interested in the culture of how we talk about this. I want to change our relationship with ourselves. And it started out just as that level. What we found from gathering all of these responses, the way that people have responded to it, is we've ended up with a couple of other goals. So one goal is to raise our general level of literacy about our minds. So I think if you think about how much we are taught in school, for example, about cholesterol, plaque on our teeth, germs. If you think about what it would be like to have a cold and you've never heard of germs. How terrifying, how confusing. You might think you've injured yourself. You might think that God hates you because you were rude to your mum at the weekend, and you have no idea what's going on. You don't want to talk about it because it's probably nothing serious, and you don't want to talk about it because it might be really serious, and before you know it, a cold has turned into pneumonia. And a simple piece of knowledge like germs means you can refer up to that knowledge and go, oh, actually, maybe I've got an infection. Maybe actually, what's going on in my body is that I'm fighting this infection. I've got, my immune system's kicking into gear. I've got antibodies being made and white blood cells. And I know what a white blood cell looks like. Why on earth do I know that? Where did that information pop into my brain from? And because of that, you can put yourself to bed with a cup of tea, or you can go clubbing, but at least you know why you feel rubbish the next day. And when it comes to our minds, we haven't got any of those basic building blocks. So I would like to build a world where we all know much more about what's going on in our minds, so we can actually talk to each other about that, and we have a common language for it, but also we have some basic understanding so that we can self-manage, we know when to ask for help. And this isn't by any means about saying everybody needs to look after themselves, because actually there's a great quote from a mental health campaigner called Rachel Perkins, who says the NHS thinks that self-help is a subset of the NHS, but actually the NHS is a subset of self-help. Knowing when to ask for help is part of managing yourself. It's okay, we're in this together. Remember the monkeys, right? It's all good. So that would be my main aim with it, to get a conversation, an informed conversation about our minds. But I think there's another really nice little thing which is a good closer for us, which is that someone said to me at the weekend that the interesting thing about this Mindapple card is that, she said, it doesn't just make people reflect on what it is that they do and think about their minds. I kind of felt like it gave me a right to this. And that really hit me. That was like, actually, yeah, that's what it's about. And if you think about how we build societies, one of the things that I definitely think we agree with Action for Happiness about is that we need to design our society in a way that fulfills our needs, matches our values, gives us what we want. And I don't think we're pretty good at it, but we need to tweak it a bit. It's going a bit out of kilter. No. Well, I think so. The point was, maybe it's because people don't have the tools to implement what they need to be happy or to be well. And I think that's right. I wouldn't for a second think that people don't have them. What I think is we're training it out of ourselves. And if you think about how little control we often feel about this incredibly complex system that we've built, that we live in, actually the first step to feeling a bit more in control is to feel more in control of your own mind. And that's all we can do. We can only really work with that 40% of how you feel day to day. We can at least help you with that bit. We can't control the money system, but we can do that little bit and help people to feel more in control. And if you think about this in the context of how we relate to our minds and our health and where we live, we are, I think, neglecting our underlying needs if we pay more attention to what our subconscious needs, what we need for our minds to be healthy and to be effective. Then we would design society in a slightly different way. And I want people to feel that they have the right to do all these things. We have, if you take animals, animals don't get depressed in the wild. Animals get depressed in zoos. We build more and more office blocks. We work longer and longer hours. And we feel more and more anxious, more and more depressed. And it's somewhere along the line we need to remember that maybe we are also angels, but we are still also animals. And I don't want Mindapples to be about engineering people to be better. Mindapples, I'll quote Tim Smith at the Eden Project. So I remember asking Tim Smith many years ago, what's the Eden Project all about? And he said, the thing is, people think that the Eden Project is about flowers. It's not about flowers. It's not about plants. And I will say to you now what Tim says about the Eden Project is true about Mindapples, which is Mindapples isn't about minds. Mindapples is about what it means to be a human being. And with that, I'll bid you good night.
Andy Gibson.